Hey y'all, my name is Ann Wyatt. I started my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky in 2010. That experience ignited a deep passion for manufacturing within me. I started this show hoping to raise more awareness around the bright outlook manufacturing careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful changemakers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Workforce 4.0. This is your host, Ann Wyatt, coming to you again from the amazing Fontainebleau Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, here for the World Innovation Summit at Schneider Electric is throwing. And we are so excited to have our next guest from the Schneider team with you today, Bobby Cain. Bobby is the CIO of Schneider Electric North America. He is very passionate about workforce development, very passionate about technology, and most of all, very passionate about the veterans out there that are serving in the workforce after serving our country. Bobby, I'm so thankful that you joined me today for this conversation. But for those that are listening that are out there, do you maybe want to give them a little bit of a more formal introduction of yourself?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I don't know how formal, but just a quick little, here's who I am. So yes, I'm the Chief Information Officer for Schneider North America. I've been with the company for 12 years. I've actually been in the electrical industry for 25 years. So most of that time between GE and Schneider. And if you go back, traditional upbringing, Indiana, went away to school, and I was on an ROTC scholarship. So for those that don't know, you train to be an officer in the military as you're going to college. And then when I graduated, I went active duty, was active duty Army, was an infantry officer, did that for 5 years. And then when I decided to exit active service, I had a great opportunity going back to the GE reference. Jack Welch at the time, CEO of GE, was really big on hiring former military officers, JMOs, junior military officers.
I remember reading a lot about Jack Welch's initiatives.
Huge supporter. And so I actually had a conversation with a colleague of mine who was getting out a little sooner than I was, and he was telling me about his job opportunities. And he's like, I've got this, I've got that. He's like, I got this black belt job with GE. I'm like, what's that? And then so learned a little bit about it. I'm like, yeah, that's what you need to do, and you need to get me in on it. And that's what happened. So he started the program, and then I came off active duty like 6 months later. I joined GE. It was a great transition for me. This is back in the late 90s. And we'll talk a little bit later about kind of how that has changed. Folks transitioning out of the military over the last 3 decades is a little different. But we kind of used to refer to it as green to gray, right? That transferring of green to gray, and it's transitioning your life. It's not just a job. It's a life transition. So, and the reason I bring that up is one of the things that really helped me with that transition is that my team that I was on, including my boss, were all veterans at the time. So that was great. Eased in to corporate America, and then started my career in with GE in sales. I refer to myself as a recovering commercial leader. So I sit here with the technology title, but I actually grew up on the sales side of the organization, and but not unlike a lot of companies where you see more of the business leaders taking on the digital roles. I had that opportunity 3 years ago and took over as the CIO. So
that's really neat.
Yeah.
I love that flexibility that Schneider offers, where if you're passionate about something and there's a path for it, they're very adaptable in saying, yeah, you know what, go for it. Let's set you up here for success.
Yes, and the adaptability piece, I think, is something we can immediately kind of get into that veteran hiring part of the conversation. Is that bringing that to the table, certainly the business acumen that I had developed, but the leadership acumen, or like those non-teachable skills that you just learn through experience, became a differentiator, became a superpower, right? So when we talk about development needs and growing in your career, but more so being mindful of, hey, how do we leverage this person's superpowers, and then putting them in the position to succeed by leveraging those strengths.
I love that. Yeah. Build your career on your strengths, right?
Exactly.
Excellent.
Exactly.
I love that, Bobby. Well, I want to kind of go ahead and get into the conversation a little bit, if you are comfortable with that. But you mentioned the transition from being in active service in the military to career, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself briefly. I worked in workforce development for 5 years for the state of Kentucky, and that was my very first job out of college. But our veterans hiring initiative was very strong, being a state agency. But one of the most difficult things that we found when we were working with those veterans and those individuals was that transition that you're talking about. Are there things that really stick out from that period of time in your life where you were transitioning from your active duty military service into this new role with GE? And more importantly, are those reflections things that Schneider you can take and adopt to the Schneider program and the Schneider Veterans program that we're also going to talk about today?
100%. I love the way that you framed the question because it becomes an underhand pitch for me, okay? and it's learning things the hard way. It's a classic case of you learn what not to do. You learn what not works. That way, when you re-engineer, hey, here's what we want to do and how we want to do it, we already know what not works. And I'll share this. I don't know if anybody from the U.S. Army is going to be listening to this, but I'll be a little critical of that time, of that institution, and really Department of Defense. There weren't good transition programs, period. Right? Mm-hmm. It was more so you clear, you go through the clearing process. Okay, great. Here's a little handbook. Good luck to you. Or
it was hard.
Right. Or maybe there's a local hiring conference, on a base. There wasn't anything. There weren't tools. There weren't programs. There weren't resources. There weren't the networks that exist today. And there certainly weren't, military-friendly employers that were decisively engaged in those activities. Right. The non-traditional hires, right? It was most of the focus was on university recruiting, and so when you fast forward today, and again the way that you framed it, certainly I can share with you, key elements of our playbook that have been very successful, and it starts with intentionality, right? We're very intentional around here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to do it, and getting that constancy of support from the executive level of the organization. And certainly, being in the C-suite myself, being an executive sponsor of this, obviously with an innate bias, but certainly we have to have that level of support. And that is a key element that just was not existent, back then. So then when you look at it as a company, and it's like, okay, great. Going back to that intentionality, what does that really mean? It means translating that strategy into tactical execution. That's the playbook comment that I mentioned, right?
Okay.
It's more about, okay, how are we going to do this? And then that's when you start getting into the branches and sequels of that conversation that, great, we have more programs, we have more resources, we have more people in this ecosystem of recruiting and hiring and actually promoting this demographic as a vein to tap into for talent, and then putting the playbook around, okay, great, how are we going to do that? So,
yeah. No, absolutely. I did not think about that, but that has got to be one of the strongest transferable skill sets that you can have coming out of active duty, taking strategic action and, making a plan and following the plan, right?
Yes.
I'm
sorry, you triggered a thought, because when you start decomposing that at the atomic level of actual skills, right, or individual skills, when you look at that talent profile, again, those are all the things that you can't teach, or a company does not train. It's the grit, it's the resilience, it's the leadership, it's the honor, it's the integrity, it's the courage, it's the it's all of those things that life experiences create, right, that they learn. And in a lot of cases, and if you just look at the folks that joined the military post 9/11, okay, it's already been 20 years. Those folks have already done a full career and have retired. out of the military. But when you look at the fact that most of that force was deployed or had multiple deployments, these are combat veterans we're talking about.
Right.
Most of those skills were learned in austere environments.
Right.
Okay. And they know how to lead. They know how to lead by example. They know how to lead themselves. You know, you don't have to necessarily be in charge of people to be a leader. So therefore, they know how to be a good teammate. They know teamwork. They know leadership. So you take all of these things and you look at, great, these are all things that, yeah, maybe you can teach, right? Or maybe you're going to, have strong university recruiting to where, you're going to be able to, get some good talent and teach them a lot of things. But typically you're not going to get that anywhere else other than that veteran demographic. And they're coming to you like ready to go.
Already trained. Essentially.
Right.
Yeah, that is one of the things that, looking back during my time in workforce development, I really wish that we could have, number one, really reiterated to our company base, right? Our clients, our employers, the folks that are hiring, making those decisions. And number two, I would have loved to have been, of course, I'm not a veteran, so it would be harder for me to speak on that. But I would have loved to have led conversations with the individual veterans that were coming into the office, that were looking for work, because I don't think that that's really apparent when you're in active duty, because you are just so trained to that. And it is just like, you wake up and this is what you do.
Right.
For like me, myself, a civilian, I had to learn, the hard way, but it took me much longer to get there because I wasn't in this experience of where I had, my life depended on it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. That's an excellent point, Ann, and I share this, and again, in pragmatic terms, it's perspective.
Right.
Right? It's having the appropriate perspective. And look, you've learned a lot about Schneider being here with us this week, and certainly as an industry leader in a very competitive industry, we have to have competitive people. Okay?
Right.
And when you talk about people that, again, with that profile, that mindset, that have that perspective, that can work in high stress environments, on high performing teams, on competitive teams, it's because they have perspective. Because at the end of the day, they're going to go home to their family. They're going to eat today. They're not getting shot at right now. Okay?
They're going to make sure everyone else on their team goes home and goes
right.
to their family too.
Right. And exactly. And they're a calming influence to where they can say, hey, you know what? Chill out. This is, we got this. And it's really, we take that mentality, and when I say we, not just veterans, but Schneider Electric, and we are very intentional around being hard on the problem and kind to the people. And those military, or the folks with the military experience and veterans, are really able to role model that, right? It's focused on the problem, right? And we need to just, kind of take the stress and emotion out of this, and let's solve the math problem, right? Because a lot of times we can just boil things down to what we do on a daily basis, is solving math problems.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and having that perspective, I think, is just a key success factor for us, for sure.
Absolutely. I love that so much. Schneider Electric just announced a major hiring initiative for veterans a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think I posted about it actually on Veterans Day. But I would love to go into that a little bit more in detail on the podcast here. What you all plan on offering as far as training, what that looks like for veterans, and who your target audience is with those new roles that are coming up.
So again, thank you for giving us some PR on that. I think that, well, a few things. There's a lot to unpack there, and I'm very passionate about this topic, as you can sense. And when we talk about that announcement, it's a big deal, but it's also kind of like not a big deal because it's already in our DNA. We're just kind of sharing what we're already doing. Okay. And if you also look at kind of how we shared that, kind of triangulating my blog post on Veterans Day, and then Jerome Saltani, who leads our services organization in North America, and then our chief HRO, Melan, we all had a post, and we were kind of referencing this, and it was a big deal. And full disclosure, we didn't plan it that way. The three of us kind of all did this, and we hit this topic, and it was very cool.
I love that.
We got a lot of great feedback around it. But if you start to unpack it, really, a few things I'd like to touch on. First of all, we worked really hard to achieve a military-friendly employer designation. That is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the scoreboard, okay? And I don't want to lean too heavily into it because it's not about stats, it's not about quotas, it's not about, the metrics. In this case, though, I think it's very important for us to be mindful that we're putting the numbers up on the board, and we are demonstrating a very high say-do ratio.
What does your veteran workforce look like?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you. So right now we have a few statistics I'll mention. Just in Jerome's organization alone, our services organization, a third of our field service reps are all military. A third of our new hires in that business are all military veterans. Okay.
Wow.
8.3% of every new employee that we've hired this year is a military veteran. We have over 1,500, and to put that in perspective, Schneider in the U.S. is about 23,000 employees. So we have 1,500 self-identified veterans. So that's a little nuance just to share. And the reason I share it is because it's actually estimated to probably be about 2x this number. But as part of their onboarding, not just with Schneider, but with any company they go through, they have to self-identify as a veteran. So these are actual statistics. We have about 1,500 total employees. Again, that's about 8.3% of our workforce. Why that is significant is for two reasons. So the Office of Federal Contracting, they have a benchmark for military contractors. We were kind of talking about this a little earlier when we were talking about our SE federal business and working, in the government. The benchmark that they have is 5.1% demographic military veterans of a company. So we far exceed that benchmark. And the other one I like to contrast against is the percentage of the U.S. population that has served, and that is 6.1%. So across the current U.S. population, it's 6.1% of the population has served in the military. So then when you look at us as a company and creating the model, the sustainable model that we've created to become military friendly and to do those things and to be able to attract to where now 8.3% of our workforce are military veterans, that's significant. That is significant.
That is.
And it really helps us create, going back to that sustainable model and what that means from a military friendly, that's not just an arbitrary or subjective designation. That is a rigorous process that we go through to achieve that. And it really helps us when you look at the talent management spectrum, attract, develop, retain, export talent to other parts of the organization where they can make an impact. When you really look at that attraction piece, our ability to attract talent and acquire talent, that is a huge, piece of goodwill. That's a tangible asset to where we are military friendly, and we're gold. We're military friendly gold. We've achieved that for the last 2 years, and it spans beyond just the employer. There's also a spouse, military spouse friendly employer, military friendly brand. We have 5 different designations in that family of designations. So again, I wanted to take a second to maybe brag a little bit, but talk about the scoreboard because that's important, because a lot of people want to talk about intentions,
right,
and desire.
Well, we mean to. We're trying to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm all about say-do ratio, and we are 100%. 100%.
I love that. But it goes beyond that, right, with what Schneider is doing. It's not just it goes beyond your active recruiting phase of your process and your talent management cycle. It really gets into not only, are you an attractive place for veterans to come work and you're offering this incentive, this program, but once veterans are hired on at Schneider, there's a support system within the company that I think is really unique, because you hear a lot of these bigger organizations, they have like their mini groups, right? Like a young professionals group.
Right.
Or an engineering group or something, right? So Schneider has their own veterans group as well.
Yes. Yes. And I am happy to share. I appreciate you asking that question because that is really the secret sauce, right? If you were to ask
Right.
me, out of all the things I've shared, what really makes that work, it's that ERN, the Employee Resource Network. And I think it's something that really differentiates us from other organizations in that, not that they may or may not have one, but when you really look at what we do and how we do it, it's materially different. And let me kind of share, just starting. And I was actually one of the founders of the ERN about 7 years ago. It was 100% grassroots. It's because we wanted to do it. There were a number of different affinity groups, like you mentioned, Young Professionals, Women in Schneider Electric, or Black Professionals Network, and awesome. It's like, why don't we have a veterans network? And so we came up with VETS, our VETS ERN, and it's actually an acronym that stands for Voices of Employees That Served. And that voice part of it, right, being vocal around who we are, led to the genesis of our framework, which is the pillars that we build the CRN on, and it's grow, honor, serve. So in simplest terms, it's creating the stickiness with our employees. It's creating that network for them to be able to develop, have opportunities. When I made mention earlier of that green to gray, when they're transitioning in, we have people represented. We actually have a person, a Space Force veteran now, so we have all branches of the military represented.
I'm
in
from
our
Huntsville,
ERN.
Bobby. I didn't know
Really?
you knew that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, nice. So, I figured I'd work that in. That it's representative of the all of DoD in terms of the military. It's great. So you create that network, and it's focused on how do we grow that network, not just in terms of numbers, but creating the value add both for our company and our customers, but employees, right? So the employee value proposition component of that mission and focusing on them. And that's where you start seeing the convergence with what we're doing from an HR standpoint. We created the role of Director of Military and Veterans Affairs. That's part of our HR organization, to where that's all they do. And some of those things are, hey, let's align our PTO policy with veterans, because not unlike most companies, you have either early career talent or maybe some entry level or jobs, standard 2-week vacation package.
Sure.
Okay, we have veterans coming out that you get 30 days of leave, right? Which is 4 weeks of vacation,
right?
And then they're signing up for a company that, now I'm only going to get 2 weeks of vacation. Something as simple as that, where, hey, that adversely affects our ability to acquire talent from that demographic. We changed that. You come in, any job, we make your leave at a minimum comparable to, what you had when you were a member of the military. So they get 4 weeks of PTO. We talk about the employer support of Guard and Reserve. So all of our reserve component folks, a number of that veteran community that we have.
Yeah, because they have to be out and they have to do their training.
Exactly. So then we have conversations around, paying them while they're on duty for a certain amount of time, and same thing with their spouse, and having programs with the spousal employment and doing those things. So all those components of growing the individual and creating the HR or people policies to be able to better support our employees and to be more mindful and sensitive of where they're at, what their needs are, and how to make them better employees. That ultimately translates into a more valuable company, right, and a strategic advantage for us.
And some of these things are not hard, like you mentioned.
No, but you just got to look at it.
Yeah.
And who's looking at it? Who's challenging it? And I say it because a lot of people just don't know. It's not out of negligence, or maliciousness. It's more so just out of negligence for not knowing and not asking and not making it a priority. Well, at Schneider Electric, we make it a priority. That's why we created that role. That's why we do those things. And then you transition into that other pillar of the VETS ERN, the serve piece. And that network is extremely active in our community. And both locally, our local chapters, and nationally, we have national partnerships with some familiar organizations, Folds of Honor, ACP, American Corporate Partners. So we're very active in mentoring folks outside the company. Again, a bunch of local charities, Beyond the Battle, just a number of them, and we do a lot of events around it to drive awareness, but also to drive financial support, and we do a good job of that.
I love that. Bobby, I have one final question for you here on the show today, but I've got to know, what are your top tips for companies that maybe are listening to this episode? Because you are right. You hit the nail on the head there when you said it's about not knowing what you don't know and not looking at it. So for companies that are maybe like listening in on this episode, what are some things that they can do to start advocating for veterans in their own organizations and making themselves more available, I guess, for the veteran talent that's out there, more attractive?
Yes. Yeah. I appreciate you asking that question because I think that opportunity exists. Okay, it does. And I'll mention a few things and some of them obvious, but let me start with just by saying, you know what? I'm okay with people reaching out to me, right? Or if you look at my network, or if you look at some of the things that I've posted, or certainly to be able to navigate Schneider Electric, reach out to me. We'll have
I love that.
a conversation, and I can share, and I'd be happy to share. And we've done this. We've done this with certain partners of ours, and I won't share all the names, but our partner companies, our distributors, some larger organizations that we work with, they know, man, you guys do a great job of building this network. Hey, we'd like to do something. Can you help us out? Absolutely. We do that. And we've learned from other organizations as well. Some of our consulting partners that we have, or larger organizations that have employee resource networks at scale, we spend time with them and we learn and we share. So long way of answering, but I have no problem with people reaching out and asking. But look, in simplest terms, be intentional about it. If you don't have intentionality, and if you are not committed to that constancy of support, it's not going to, I don't want to say it's not going to work, but it's going to be exceedingly difficult to create a sustainable model, right? And then when you start creating that legacy of, okay, regardless of who started it, or regardless of who all the leaders were at the time, everybody sees it as a valuable organization. And part of the intentionality gets into kind of what I shared early. You have to be able to translate the strategy into a playbook, right? You can't just say, hey, I want to have 5% of our new hires be in the military. Oh, okay, great. Good goal. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Right? And I think that's where people either misstep or don't take that step, and then they maybe they feel good a little bit about, hey, I have a goal, but what's the plan to achieve the goal? So that's the advice that I would share. Have a plan. Have a plan.
Have a plan of action. Work the plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to your point, this morning during the presentation in the big theater downstairs, they played a video, but some of the text on the video clearly read, this is more than a conversation. This is a blueprint.
There you go.
So I love that. Bobby, is it okay if I link your LinkedIn in the show notes so that they can reach out to you?
No, I would love that if you could do that. That'd be great. I appreciate the opportunity to engage in this conversation because it drives awareness.
Yeah,
it drives awareness. If we're successful at anything, just from our time to spend together, at least somebody's going to ask a question. They're going to be a little bit more aware. And so, yeah, if we can help them navigate to somebody that can help, that'd be great. And I really appreciate you doing that, Ann. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Bobby. I really appreciate your time as well. I know you are so busy. If you are out there today listening in on this episode of Workforce 4.0 and you want to learn a little bit more about Schneider Electric's Veterans Initiative, feel free to reach out to Bobby. His information will be linked in the show notes. As always, we appreciate your time as well, and we will see you next week on another episode of Workforce 4.0.